Hi everyone. Okay, in this Coding Byte video, I'm going to go a little bit more old school again. So back to my usual, not really have too much of a plan. I know where we want to end up at the end of this video, and where I want to be is just to investigate some of this file system API that we've got access to in the web browser. And this comes off the back of a question from Oscar. So currently what we did is we've got the ability to do loading and saving of JSON, and we can load a JSON file from the client side, take it inside JavaScript, take it apart, parse it, and push it into the PLC variables. So that was our previous videos. We also had the ability then to take a structure. We're actually doing an array of structures. We pull it from the PLC, and then again we turn it into JSON. It's actually already JSON for us. We stringify it, and then we save it out to a file. Fine, so far so good. But when we do the save, it just throws it into our download folder. It almost treats it as a download, so which isn't ideal. Because there is a file system API that's apparently available. I've not really done too much with it, but this is what we're going to experiment with today. And that gives you a little bit more of what you would expect from an application, something that can save as and then save multiple times over the top. So this video is going to be a little dive into that. Obviously, check out at the end. Hopefully we've got a working solution by the time we finish, and there'll be a Git repo as well with the code. But otherwise, watch the video and you'll see how I make my way through and how we go about learning this. So let's jump right in. Okay, so I'm going to be following along with this this web dev, or using this web dev page for file system access. So had a little skim read, because we always skim read documentation typically, and the bits I've picked up on so far. And by the way, this was actually submitted by the community. A lot of people have come back and said, hey, did you know there's a file system API? Which I didn't. So thank you very much for that. It allows us to all broaden our JavaScript knowledge. And just having a quick squint through, they're using async await functions. So very similar to promises. And because there's a certain amount of asynchronicity about this, because we're going to ask it to show a file system like a file picker dialog. The browser will actually do that, and JavaScript will wait until it comes back with a reply. So that's why we're in the world of async. And from what I can see so far, there's this. They've got two functions that they're making. It's their function they've written. They're saying get new file handle. So clearly it's treating this whole I want to save something as browser, can you please get me a handle to a file, or make me a handle, and then I'm going to do the save operation using that file handle instead. Very similar to how file system operations work in the first place. So let's have a little look at that. So the first thing I can see is they've got an example of a function get new file handle. They've got some options saying what type of thing do they want to present to the user, which is handy because we can call that JSON and JSON files. Then it returns a handle, and this window show save file picker that tends to be, well, that looks to be anything that's window dot is going to be put there by the browser itself. So that's just native JavaScript that comes with the browser. So you've got to see if the browser actually supports this in the first place. One thing that I had a very, very small little poke around with, I did see that this has to be triggered by a safe interaction, and that usually means that this has to be like propagated by a click event. So we'll have a little look. We'll try and run some of this up front, but you never know. Things may fail because okay, it may see the console whenever I'm writing in the console as being particularly safe because I'm doing a user interaction. But what they're saying is you can't just trigger this via JavaScript, maybe on a time delay, because otherwise people would exploit those type of things. Anything that starts saving files out and start throwing downloads at you, they don't really like it if it's not come from a user interaction, because otherwise that's when you get these bad, nasty pages that just try and throw files at you all the time. They've done away with that. They've said, no, some functions may only be called if the thing that kicked it off in the first place is something like a mouse click or a keyboard event, that type of thing. So we'll see how we get along with that as well. Okay, let's do a little bit of coding. Let's just see what happens. So I've got the project up and running so far, and what we've currently got. I'm just going to go inspect. I'm going to do it in the console window to start with, because only I find the console window slightly easier for trying stuff out. There's nothing to stop us making a function in TCHMI. The only thing is, every time we save it, you then have to refresh it. It will refresh with a mouse click, but it's just a step I don't like taking just for the time, especially when it's super new. So I'm just going to paste that in, and okay, there we go. So what that's done in essence is I've defined an async function called getNewFileHandle. It takes no arguments. Obviously, this occurs and it returns out a handle. Now, it does return out a handle, but because it's an async function, the return of this, the actual true return, is going to be a promise, and then the promise will resolve. And when the promise resolves, it should have a handle inside it. That's what happens when we get into the world of async await. So let's just have a look, because even if I don't catch the promise, it doesn't really matter. We'll just trigger it off, and so far so good. There we go. What more can we say? Nice. Okay, because I'm not catching the handle, uncalled promise, there we go. This promise here, well, actually, look at that. It's even telling me, I can see inside it and say it's rejected. Oh, this is pretty good. I'm always surprised by the developer console. I like it. Save as test.txt. There we go. Save, and let's just have a look. Let's see what was inside. It was fulfilled, which is nice as well. So there we go. We can obviously take apart the promise, and oh, there we go. We've even got the result. So the kind name test.txt kind. There we go. There's a few extra bits and pieces, but ultimately I don't really care too much what's inside of it, because we're going to pass that on to something else that's going to do something else with it. And the thing that we're going to be passing it to is going to be something along those lines. Write file. Okay, so let's. I don't have contents to write, so let's have a little look. So file handle create writable. Write the contents of file to a stream. Writable write contents. Now contents. I'm just going to put some JSON in there and just see what pops out the other end. So let's just copy this in as well. And I'm just going to paste it in as well, because again, these are all just being pushed up into the global scope. They're just file write. Write file now exists as a function inside this page. It's just being held there. If I refresh the page, it'll be destroyed. It'll be gone. The other thing I might do, well, let's give it a go. So what I want to do this time is get file handle. That's this part here. We can then call then. Well, we should be able to call then. And we should, let's think. So then is going to allow us to have a function. So we can call a function at this point. So function, open close braces. And this is going to be the result. Let's just test this out first. So what I'm going to do is console.log the result. And close the, oops, crikey, I've got so many things going on there. So that's the end of the function itself. That's the close brace of the then, and there we go. So tests 2, and it did it. I mean, okay, it's hard to see, but as the then occurred, because it's a promise, it gets called back at the end of it with then. This function was called. It passed in the result, and then all I did was console log out the result. That's why we can see this thing here. So yeah, so far so good. Again, I must apologise for my async await knowledge. There is a way of stacking async awaits together. And it's kind of this, await, but I'm going to take a bit more of a manual approach, and we'll tidy it up when we get into the real code. So let's just bring that back in. So instead of console logging, the first thing I'm going to do is go let's go var my, and let's just split this over onto some new lines as well. I'm just holding the shift when I did that, shift enter, just to allow me to do multiple lines. Let's get that out of the way as well, I don't need that. Okay, so I'm going to say var my data is equal to, let's just put an object in here. So my data is equal to, and we should be able to do things like this as well. Tests is hello, something along those lines. I think when I'm making objects, I have to use all speech marks in them to start with. This, and wow, I can just console log this out as well. Console log my data. Oh, my data. Oh, let's do data, and let's just change this. Okay, so hopefully I'm going to console log out some data that's valid. If it all falls on its face, at least I've got the console log there, just to see if that's the correct way of making an object in that we can use. The next thing I'm going to do is call this one. So write file. Write file. So that's the function that we already know that we've defined just up here. It's asking for a file handle. Now the result, I'm going to say that the result is probably the file handle. We might need to take it apart, but yeah, it's a file system file handle that's being given back. So I'm just going to pass that straight into the function, just see what we get. And the contents of that is going to be my data. My data. Close brace. Let's go with that. That looks pretty good. So we're going to go test 3.text. I'm going to put this into the temp folder as well, because that way I can just easily head off and go and search. Uncaught in promise, failed to execute write on the file, blah, 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 blah. Failed to read the type property from write params, required number is undefined. There we go. And it all falls apart just that easy, eh? So back to the help. Let's just have a little look. Okay, gotchas. Sometimes processing to be saved data takes some time after the user clicks the save button. Security error failed. Must be handling user gesture. It doesn't seem to be affecting it at the moment because we're working in the console. So file system, create file system, writable, await, file handle, create writable, write contents, and close. Writing the disk uses this object. Create writable on file handle objects. Okay, let's just see if there's anything here. So uncaught in promise failed to execute write on the file system writable file stream. Failed to read the type property from write params. Okay, let's go Googling. There you go. And this is what I was saying about this being a old school coding bytes. Because we're just going to find it out as we go. So let's have a look. Let's see if so then response. So you're trying to access item field students array. That's doesn't look like the right thing. Okay, right type. Okay, so write data. So it looks like the data itself that we're trying to write is clearly not just have whatever you like. So that makes sense, because obviously I've just made some random object. So write data. So go on in, give us an example of what the data is. So data can either be the file data to write in the form of a buffer source, a blob, or a USV string, or an object containing the following properties. There we go. Okay, so this makes sense. So following properties being type, of type write, seek, or truncate. Data, the data of the file to write. The position in bytes for the current file cursor should move, crikey. And the size and unsigned long. Okay, slightly harder than I was expecting. So let's just steal some code out of here, because I know we are making a blob data. We already do this. This is something we already do. So because this is where we normally pull the data from the PLC. So let's start using some of this. So new blob data, that's the file, create object with the file. So it's only really these two lines here that's going to take some form of JSON, which hopefully I've already made anyway, turns it into a blob, and then we can save it. So let's give that another go. So let's pull that up, file system, this one here, and we will throw, just paste that in. and just hit Shift and Space. So var data, so data now, so we've got my data. I want to stringify my data there, and a little bit odd lines here. The file is then a blob, which is based on this data. Write file based on the file. Let's give that a go instead. Here we go. Oh, you can see it actually makes the file. So even though it didn't work, it still made it. So test. Let's go to test4.txt. Well, there we go. And if we just open up this, well, that was a success. Quite happy with that. So let's take the code that we've already done now and move that back into our example, because I think that's probably about it. And that was a quicker video. I'm sure it won't finish just there. So let's copy some of these across. So the ones that we used were this async function to get a new handle. So let's just go in. So save JSON. When this thing kicks in, when we call this save JSON here, it's calling these functions. It doesn't really matter that we define the functions inside here. So defining this async function, although I have a funny feeling that this isn't going to support async await inside. So there we go. I thought it was going to be a quick video, and boom, we run into our first issue. So we need to turn an async await back into promises. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take off the async await. At this point here, the constant handle, that's not a handle anymore, because this thing here is going to be passing back a promise. Which, okay, so unfortunately that's going to be a promise. So we don't need to put it anywhere. We can kind of treat it the same way as what we did the other one. So we can actually say then instead, because we're going to say, hey, if you've got a response for us, here's our then. We're going to call a function. It's an anonymous function. Let's just open and close that. Our response, what we remember, response, and you can write any text there, because that's the nice thing with JavaScript. It just says, hey, you've given me a callback function. I've got an argument to give you. I'll put it in the first name that you give me. So we don't. I can put Ben in there, and it more than happily fill Ben up with the response of this promise. So when that response comes in and we're happy with it, again, there's no error detection in any of this at the moment. So we're just going to go with it, see if we can make it work, and then we'll refactor again. So this one here. So then function. Okay. So we're going to return. We can't return either. Oh, let's think where we are. So at that point there, we're kind of going to have to make this all up into, let's think. So show save file picker. This thing, so this, let's just make this right. So this here, get new file handle. No, we're doing that in the wrong place. Sorry about that. Okay, so instead of returning the file handle at that point, get new file handle. It's just going to be returning out. It's going to return the promise for us because return the result of this, which is a promise. There we go. So that was a little bit long-winded there. So really what this thing's going to do is get new file handle. All it's doing is setting up this first part, and then it's calling the show save file picker, and that's it. It can't do any more at that stage because it's not going to do any more at that stage. It's just going to return out the promise of resolving that later. Right, let's carry on, and then we'll tie it all together. So, because otherwise I'm in danger of losing it all. Let's go into this one now, and we're just going to, because we know we want this function as well, because we might be able to combine all these functions up and just see what we make out of it, that type of thing. going to take out the awaits. Oh, there's a lot of awaits on these things as well. Ooh. So if we write a file, I think already, because we're working with promises, and this is kind of why async await came about, because you end up with promise chaining. I think we are going to start chaining the promises together already, because it's nice having these as separate functions, but because we can't have async await, it kind of makes these functions a little bit irrelevant at the moment. Now, don't get me wrong, there's going to be some JavaScript programmers out there who are going to be screaming at the screen at this stage, and please feel free to submit better ways of doing this, because, again, I'm at the level where JavaScript I know enough to be dangerous. And so what I'm going to do is start stripping a lot of this out now, and instead of just making little functions that were async await functions, I'm just going to start dealing with promises as they come, and using them as promises that resolve. So instead of having all these little functions that get waiting, I know what I want to do. A lot of them are going to be promises, and I will wait until those promises resolve, and we'll just play pass the parcel. So this thing up here, when we call save JSON, it's going to set up this options, and then it's going to call show save file picker. Happy with that. That's not an issue. This thing here is a promise, which means at that point there I get a then, and this whatever function I get put in here is going to get called. So once I've I mean, really, we're going to start going into the writing the file at that point. So ideally, I would like to do this bit first, because this is the part which is going to be the async side of the PLC. And again, the async side of the PLC, that's not using promises, that's using callback functions. So I'm just going to put this at the top. So what we're saying here is go off and read this array. And when you have, here's a callback function, so kind of very similar to how a promise resolves. Here's a callback function that you will call when you have some form of result for me. And what we're saying is, as long as there is no errors in what comes back, start doing this. So we also know as well, we're going to keep this first task because we need to turn it into a blob. So all of this is going, this one here. So this is where we're going to put our new functions now. So at that point there's nothing to stop us taking this code out and dropping that in here. So once we've collected our data from the PLC, we're then going to start preparing this show save file picker. So just making some options, blah, 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 blah. Let's change this and just call it JSON files. JSON, oops. This one here, dot JSON, text plain. Don't know, what do they normally put in here? Text plain, I'll put text plain because JSON is text. So anyway, if that breaks, we'll just put it back to text again. Right, so we've made the options. We've now said show save file picker options then, and this is a point where we say, well, this then we want to pass you in a callback function. So at this point, let's put it up on this line. So this is gonna have a function. This is gonna be the response. Okay, and I want you to run this code that's here. So this is that. So far, so good. So if we were to do a console log here, this is going to be, at this point, hopefully, because we've got no error detection, we now have a file handle. Hopefully. There we go. So at that point there, as long as this returns back the response, we now have a file handle, as long as I haven't hit cancel. And again, we can write the cancel code later anyway. At this point here, this response is going to be holding that file handle. Now we know the next part, we were doing this. So we were actually passing in this file handle and the contents. And what we were doing is this thing here. I think I deleted async out of there. So let me just, await, sorry. So let me just put the original code in. And I'm not gonna copy from this. we'll just put it here. So this thing here, file handle dot create writable, that's an await as well. So for us, because we're not using async await, that means that that's going to be returning a promise, which means inside of here, we can actually chain them. So we can say, and I'm pretty sure you don't have to embed promises inside functions. So if I return this, urn, return that instead, what it does is it actually passes. So this then, it calls a function that then is going to return another promise. And because another promise has been returned, I'm allowed to, at the back end of this one, write .then. So at that point there, it's now going to be only called after this thing has finished. Okay, so let's try this out, and then we'll see just how many errors we get at the end of it. So again, I'm going to do response. A bit dangerous actually. I'm going to do this one here is going to be my file handle. Function file handle. Oh crikey. Yeah, no, that makes sense, because then we're calling, because originally the file handle was being passed in. There we go. So whatever our response is, I'm going to call it file handle. We then call upon it file handle.create writable, which is good. So this thing passes back a promise. The promise thing gets called then. We're then going to pass in a new function. This was actually writing it to a thing called writable. So I'm going to say that this thing is writable, and there's a function inside of it, which we're then going to close. And inside this function, we've got await write and await close. So kind of feels like they're both asynchronous as well. So we'll see how that goes. So write the contents. Async. No, await write, await close. I don't know. Again, this is where my knowledge of async await. I don't use it enough because it's not used into HMI, and it probably will be, but it just doesn't seem to be supported in the editor at the moment. I'm going to go with that just for the moment. I think I'm going to have to write promises for these two, because I think this is the magic of JavaScript, the way it automatically converts async and awaits into promises. But let's have a look. Let's just see how messy this has become when we try and run it. Let's hit save on that. And into here, click to reload, save. Okay, so that's a good start. Test 4, oops, test 5.text. Uncaught in promise. Content is not defined. Yeah, that's probably valid. Yeah, write contents of the file. It's not called contents because I've copied it from the other one. So our contents was actually up here where we made this file out of this blob, and we can do this one here. The thing is, because this is defined in the same scope, in the same area, that exists for these. So so that's fine to do. They just know it. They know that scope. They know where to find this. So let's just save that again. And we'll do save. We can probably just go straight over the top of this one. So save. Yes, we do want to replace it. Nothing major's occurred, no errors, and we've got the contents there. Well, I'm actually more surprised that works straight off the bat. What I'd like to do is console.log, because I think I'm just getting away with this. I think await, I'm pretty sure that's going to be returning some form of promise again. So I'm just going to save that. It's still going to run it, because obviously I'm calling please console log out the result of me calling this close thing. But I want to see what actually pops out at the end of it. If it pops out a promise, I'm just being lucky. And yeah, there we go. So it's promise fulfilled. yeah. We're just being lucky on that one, and it's not actually occurring. We're just getting away with it. So no, we need to fix that. So these things themselves are they are also asynchronous. So it means that we can't just go straight in and just fire them straight away, because as I call write, I'll also be calling close at the same time. And it just so happens that it's probably because it's so fast, it's such a small file. By the time I've hit the close command, it's already been written. So we're probably just getting away with it. There we go. So let's just. I didn't have any other console logs, did we? No. So it's definitely that. Right. So function writable. This thing here. I'm gonna make these two just work together. So rather than breaking out into another then, I'm sure can be that people will be saying, no, you can just stack this again. Just feel free to stack it. But because I'm only being passed writable via this, as far as I'm aware, it's only this function at the moment that knows about the variable writable. Now, I could make it go up the scope a little bit, because if I call another .then after this, if I return this write file .then, by the time I get to writable close on the next one, we're in danger of not having that variable. We don't know what that variable is at that point. So as another way of doing it, I could say that when I'm passed in writable via this one here, I could actually save it into a variable of this function, which is, because it's over the top of everybody, everyone has access to that variable. I could save it into there, which means that everyone else gains access to it. Again, the professional JavaScript programmers out there who are watching this, I can only apologise. Let's just do it the first way, and then I'll see if I can swap it to the second way. So this thing here is a promise, therefore I can call then, and it's going to be a function. I don't really care about passing in the arguments. That's not, although I should if it's if I'm working with a failure or working with errors. Open and close for what I want to do inside it, and then we're just going to call writable close on there. And oops, put that in the wrong place. Put that here, and let's just comment that out for the time being. Just save that. Make sure it still works. Save. Test 6. Just to make sure nothing's going wrong. Yeah, test 6 has turned up. Actually, it works better now because you can't see that on my screen. I'll just move it across. So test 6 JSON. Let's just move that over there as well so we can see that's coming across nicely. And that will be doing the asynchronous side better too. So it won't be calling close until the write has completed now. So that's a better thing. I'm just going to try it the other way too, because why not? Let's just try a few things. This is coding bytes at the end of the day. It's maybe not perfect code, but it gets us thinking about code, which is the whole purpose of this. So I'm going to make var writable is just equal to just a nothing thing at the moment. Writable var writable. Let's just do this. My writable. Let's just call it my writable for the moment. My writable. Oh, writable file. Let's just call it a writable file. That's actually a little bit. Okay, so I've got a writable file. When this thing gets called, writable file is going to be equal to writable. And I think, do I have to do set? No, let's just make it equal. I think I'm confusing two different languages there. So writable file at that point, we can then say writable file write the file, and instead of doing a then, and we're just going to cut this out again. Let's take all of that out there. Oh, take all this out. Cut. This one here, this is just going to be a return, because we're returning a promise. This is the promise that gets returned, which means it gets stacked, which means we can do promise. It's like a chain of promises. Function. You might find writable file, the promise of this, you might find it passes itself back. Who knows, eh? But anyway, let's response. Don't know what that response is at the moment. We could console log it to see what's actually inside of it. And that's that. And let's just put in some console logs too, just to make things a bit easier to follow. Console.log, closing file. And that's what we want, because then we can call just writable file close on it. And that one there. Okay, because writable file has been set up here. Again, I'm well aware that there is 0 error checking in any of this at the moment. So if any of this was to fail, then it'll all start failing. Because let's just take that out. And I mean, technically, that's asynchronous as well. So it's going to return that promise. Not that we're going to do anything with it, although we should. Then response, and then we're just going to do console.log save complete. There we go. Okay, so we're handling, we're actually doing something with that final. There. Great, there we go. So let's see if all that works, then we'll just go back over it again and then probably start adding some error checking into this too. Okay, and I'm keen to see what actually comes out of these responses too. So let's just see what happens first, if it works, and then if it does, we'll then go into it a little bit more. So save that out, click reload, save. We're going to save this one as test7, just so we're not clashing. Closing file, save complete. So everything's occurring in the right order. That's the whole reason for promises. They stack up the order of what they're doing. Let me just make sure that inside that file is what we expect. Which it does. So far so good. So the code's still working. That's a good sign, eh? That's a good sign. Let's do this one. So closing file console.log response. Because I just want to see what is passing through to us, because you might find it's playing pass the parcel with itself. And if that's the case, we don't need to set this variable that we're passing around. So okay, I've got 2 of those in now. And do a save. We'll just save it over to 7. Undefined, undefined. So yeah, they're not actually passing anything back, which it kind of makes sense, because all they're doing is well, does it make sense? Yeah, they're not discovering anything when they're writing. I mean, a promise is either resolved or failed, or there's another one. That's again. Why are you watching these videos? Eh? There we go. So JavaScript promise response. Let's just have a quick look, because quite often, so then on fulfillment, on rejection. So chaining promises. So obviously this is what we're doing at the moment. So handle rejected. So what they're doing here is they're actually setting up functions that will handle the resolve or handle a rejection, which is fine. So catch, handle rejection any. So if any of them fail, I mean, that's probably actually not a bad one to use. So .catch. But one of the benefits, because we haven't given, I mean, when you do promises, and this is with the light learning of what I've done, with a promise, we're giving it a callback function and saying, hey, can you do this? Can you do this job next? if it's passed. You can give it a second one and say, but could you do this if you fail? Because we're chaining them together like this, we get the added benefit of if any of them were to fail, we get catch. And catch just means that all of these fail, it just resolves itself to going, I found a catch, I'll run this one instead. So instead of us actually needing to do any form of error handling now, it's actually taken care of it for us by chaining them together. So catch function, and I'll see what the response is on this one as well, because I'm just keen to see what comes back on a failure. So let's just make sure this is okay. I'm just copying and pasting, which get copy paste errors if you do copy pasting, but saves a little bit of time. So I'm going to console log out the response. I'm also going to console log out save failed. And that's pretty much it. Let's close this. Oops, close this, close that, and finish. And that's the end of our catch as well. So we're going to get rid of these console logs here because there was nothing in those responses. So we'll get rid of those. And I think we're all pretty much done. So I'm going to do a save. Back to this one here. Click. Save. We'll start a new one because I don't want it to be affected. So test8.json because I just want to make sure it's still working. So far so good. That was good. And I unfortunately shut down. Let's just open this one up so we can see it. So temp, we've got test8 that exists. And it's got the right values inside it. So that all worked. I'm now going to do a save and a cancel because that actually, there we go. So that itself, doing a cancel, that failed the first promise. And you can see here, save failed. That ricocheted through all of the promises. So we killed it at this point. Create writable. Let's just make sure. Yeah. The very first promise that we made, the first of the thens, failed, and it had the effect of cancelling off every other then in the chain because it's only on succeed that we carry on, and it caught it by the catch block, and we called save failed. Great. So there we go. That's I'm going to say that that's a bit of a success there. So just after save failed, we got the DOM exception, user aborted the request. So that's actually what was told to us via this response. So it's even taken the failed message from the very top one and thrown it down at the bottom so we can actually see it as well. I'm quite pleased with that. So is there anything else that we want to do? Now, I don't think I'm going to code this. I mean, yeah, I'm going to class that as a bit of a success. This is obviously a 40-minute coding byte video at this stage. That we've gone through a little bit of a journey there of did we go the right way? Obviously bringing async await into Twinkle HMI, which, yeah, I will need to investigate that. I just don't think it's either not supporting it in terms of does it know about async awaits, or I don't really know how it deals with versions of JavaScript. But in the past, whenever I've brought in async await, it complains and it thinks there's syntax error. So not sure with that one, really. So I've always just converted them back into promises. Anything that's async await it is a promise. You just take async await off the front of it, and then you just work with it like a standard promise. So this thing here, this is promise chaining. It's a fairly standard thing to do. You don't actually need to write the function inside of it either. We could have defined all the functions. Thinking about it, we could have made each individual function up front, and then you just pass the function name into them, and those functions will get called. But I think this looks fairly tidy so far. The other thing as well that we could do, we're not going to code it because, like I say, it's been a long time, is the save, because I'm sure can be that we have the ability, well, it's kind of the same thing. I don't know if they're even going to speak about it. Stored files directly handles permissions, stored file. not persistence between sessions, blah, blah, blah. Query file permissions. Yeah, I'm pretty sure because we are in our, we've only loaded the page once and we're sitting there. I think if we were to save, once we've got this, the file handle, once that file handle is made available to us, if we were to take that variable that's come back, and at the moment we're just writing it into a writable file. That's just something, and it's a variable that only lives inside this function, which means every time this function gets called, it gets made anew. We get a new space for that file handle. It's kind of, think of a function as like a little instance, which all functions have an instance at the end of the day, but only a very short-lived instance. There's nothing to stop us having another bit of code live in a save button. So this, we've made a save as button at the moment. There's nothing to stop us. We could always swap out the code that's in our save as button. So we'll just do a thought experiment now. I've got a save as button, and the first time I press it, it invokes this code. Not only that, it can talk to itself. On success, we could actually say it, that this last one here, on this final then, we could take the value of writable file, which is still the handle. That's, oh, sorry, that's the handle. No, it's there, file handle. This one. We could take that file handle, and we could put it into a function, and we could say, hey, function, you're now the save function, and we could make a save function inside of here. So we could actually say, make new function, and here's the file handle, and here's all the steps you would make to save this file again. So really, it's just this bit here again. You could make that, and you could take that function, and you could ask the button we've just made to change its on-click event, and its on-click event could be this new function we've just made. So at that point there, the button has a function which knows the file handle. The file handle's embedded into it. So the next time we just hit save, we skip the go and get a file handle dialog box, and we just trigger a save on the same file handle, which means we don't get the dialog. It saves straight over the top. I'm pretty sure I've seen it where it warns and says, hey, the browser's trying to save back over this handle again, or it does it in a nicer way. But you'll just get a straight up save onto the file. So we can mimic save and save as. Maybe you don't want the same button to that one button to have two functions. Maybe you have a second button, and the second button is just save. The button we've made is save as, and save as always works as a save as, so it runs through this process. But maybe the save button by default has no code inside it, no on-pressed any functions to call, and maybe we set its state as disabled. And it's only once we've done a save as, and we successfully did a save as, that we take that handle, wrap it in a function, pass that to the on-pressed event of the save button, and we enable the button. So at that point there, they can hit save as many times as they like, and it just keeps saving over the top. Or the next time they do a save as, the same process occurs. You get a new handle, we package it up into a little function, we pass it to the save button, and then forevermore that save button now is the only ever save over the top of file 8, for example. Okay, I am going to call it a day there. So that was, like I say, this is old school coding Bytes. You just see me haphazardly make my way through some coding. I hope you've learned some bits and pieces from here as well. I definitely learn while I do these as well, so that's part and parcel of it. I'll make this available on the repo. I'm going to make a new repo for this anyway, just so it doesn't confuse with the original. And yeah, again, keep sending in some suggestions of what you'd like to see, or if there's any changes and bits and pieces. And yeah, on to the next video. Speak to you soon.